Welcome to Clear Minds Podcast. I'm joined here today with David. David,
Hi.
great having you on. Lot of experience, a lot of insight. How long do you have now sober, David?
In January, celebrated 40 years.
40 years. Wow. So a lot of knowledge, a lot of experiences. And yeah, thank you again for coming on.
My pleasure.
All right. First, we'll talk about identity and personal growth. Who are you now that you're sober compared to the person you were during your addiction?
It's like night and day. Um, my sponsor when I first got sober used to say, you're so sick that you don't think you're sick, you're really sick, but you don't know that when you first come here. Most of us come to the rooms of recovery because they're in trouble. I'm a huge believer that the common denominator for people who come through the door is alcohol and trouble. And if I could drink in safety today, I would be drinking today because alcohol works for the alcoholic. For 30 seconds of solace, comfort, escape, we're willing to take that chance, even though we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that severe consequences are coming, but we don't care. And then the change takes place. I don't think a lot of people give enough credit to the fact that the simplicity of putting the plug in the jug, and in my case, how my life changed instantaneously when I put the plug in the jug. Because once I did that, I had so much time on my hands. Because all I did in the end of my drinking, probably last 5 years, was plan to be drunk, or recover from a drunk. So, and I was sharing with someone earlier today about how you think about it that how come most of us, when we reach that point, after you reach the point that you don't care, and then you reach the point that you want to stop and you can't. And I was asking myself that question out of the blue, why can't we stop? And I've come to the conclusion that the answer is because we don't know how. And we have to be taught that. And that's what is the genesis of being able to recover, realizing that when my sponsor said, "You do not know what the hell you're talking about," really was a tough pill to swallow, but was really the truth. In the 30-second retrospect, Stevie Wonder could see that my life was messed up and I didn't know what I was doing. I came here with a conveyor belt of bad decisions and a mountain of wreckage that I didn't think I would ever be able to take care of. But in spite of all that, you know, they told me to come back, which is an amazing thing when you think about the condition I was in when I got here. I always like to share how, I wasn't being invited anywhere. I mean, I heard crap like, no, you're going to jail. Get off my job site, get out of my house, go away, you're nothing but trouble. And the overwhelming heartbreaking of that was from the people who loved me. Because if you're an outsider looking at an alcoholic who's headed towards a cliff that he doesn't know is there, it's heartbreaking to watch someone go there. When you know they're headed for severe trouble, yet they don't care, they don't listen, they don't want to know until God intervenes. And that's kind of what happened to me.
Yeah, I think that I can agree with that. We don't know how to stop, especially after we pick up that first one.
Yep.
Do you ever mourn the version of yourself that existed during your addiction?
Not even close. It's my life has changed so much. My MO when I was drinking was I got into trouble and then I asked for help. Please forgive me, I'll never do it again. And AA flipped that to today I ask for help and I just don't get into as much trouble. And when I put the plug in the jug, I'm a huge believer by observation and by personal experience that probably 50% of what I did when I was drinking I wouldn't have done unless I was drunk. And I think that's a huge part of why we're able to recover, because the decisions we make while we're drunk cause unbelievable amount of shame and remorse and guilt and all that stuff. And when we stop making those bad decisions, just the simple fact of putting the plug in the jug changes our lives to like, who was that guy? That he was so lost and saw no way out and don't care, and then reach that point where you can't imagine life with alcohol without alcohol. So that beginning, but most people, and we don't share about it enough, in my opinion, about how important that is. Because you'll hear people say all the time, I don't have a drinking problem, I have a thinking problem, where there's some truth to that. But the only reason I don't have a drinking problem is I'm not drinking. And that sets up the opportunity to deal with all the other idiosyncrasies that make me who I am and what I am, and being able to stop making the bad decisions and making better decisions along the way, especially through the power of example, the people that I met along the way that showed me how to, they taught me because I didn't know. But if you don't know that, you don't know. You're in, you're like in the wilderness, thinking you have directions, but you're just going around in a circle. I had a friend who, not drinking, but they were tripping, and he was in the middle of the woods, and he couldn't find his way out, and so his solution was to sit down by a tree and wait for the sun to come up. Then he could find his way out. And that's kind of how we are. We're so blind that we don't even know it. And but the despair and the isolation and all that just overwhelmed me to be um, a multitude of emotions at the same time, being angry, being sad, being fear of rejection, and all of those things coupled that you may have had all that stuff before you picked up a drink, but alcohol is the great magnifier, and it magnifies all that crap to a point where it looks like a huge elephant that you're never going to be able to get around, understand, or be able to make right. So,
So it's safe to say you don't mourn that life.
that didn't happen overnight, though.
Mm-hmm.
Just like active alcoholism is progressive, active sobriety is progressive too. Some of the things that I didn't understand or couldn't handle was because I wasn't supposed to. If you don't drink and you come back tomorrow, you have a chance at a better life. So God has a way of protecting us from ourselves. And then other things, I've learned that the subconscious is an incredibly tough thing to deal with, because this stuff that we hide away, or like when we talk about doing a fourth step, it really is just a snapshot of where you are at that particular day. And along the way, as we get sober and our eyes open, and we're healthier, and we're participating and taking care of our family and doing the things we're supposed to do, more shit gets revealed. And like I can remember driving on Sistrunk Boulevard in Fort Lauderdale one time and drove past this water tower, and a flashback came to me that, man, I remember sleeping under that water tower. But it never would have manifested itself unless it was triggered at that particular juncture. That wow. Mm-hmm. So we bury shit for better or worse, and most of it's it's subconscious. We don't really, it doesn't eat at us until it shows up, and then you got to deal with it. But it's a crazy thing, that the human mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What's one misconception you had about yourself that sobriety shattered?
For me, I lived in a paralyzing fear. I was one of these guys when I was in high school. I was, if I asked a girl out and she said yes, I think to myself, oh my God, what do I do now? Because I was so ill-equipped. Well, I don't think it's ill-equipped. I was inexperienced, like most guys. Mm-hmm. As you mature and learning how to get knocked down and get back up, which is what AA is all about when you think about it. Mm-hmm. So when I came to the rooms of recovery, I was surprised to find out that you were just as scared as me, and I did not know that. And then I heard a guy say that he thought he was the center of the universe, till he came to the rooms and found out that the center of the universe is an extremely crowded place. You got all these people who think the world revolves around them, and you find out that there's a comfort in that. There's a relief in that makes you able to sit in the seat you're there and identify with the people who are similarly afflicted, and be able to come back tomorrow. That's the most important thing that we can do for anybody, is to make them feel so comfortable that they want to come back tomorrow. Because you don't got to figure it all out today, and that's the beauty of it. And I was so scared of rejection that I didn't try, which would lead to despair and depression and isolation and all those things that stifle us or stunt our growth. But when you're in the middle of it, every decision I made when I was drunk, I thought were brilliant decisions, But as you go along, and they say, just how did you get here, right? And then it's unbelievable how it becomes crystal clear once you accept the fact that you can't drink in safety. And that allows all that other stuff to manifest itself, especially through the example of the people I met in the beginning. They were serious about the program, and they were serious about staying sober. And one of the things that blew me away, because I got 12-stepped at work, and this guy befriended me when I was going through a DUI, and he said he would take me to where and how he got sober. But the thing that really blew me away, there was an absence of condescension. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that what he was telling me was the truth. But more important, he didn't give a shit whether I believed him or not. And that I didn't know was extremely attractive because I wasn't really exposed to that. I may have been exposed to that before I drank and stuff, but from the time I was 13 to the time I was 27 when I got sober, I never really experienced that because you know, misery loves company. So you're attracted to people who are just moronic as you, making the same bad decisions. Or like my younger brother was my barometer. He was an extrovert in the middle of a barroom fight and stuff. I started selling drugs for a living at 16, so I was a passive paranoid drunk. I didn't want the attention, so I wouldn't get arrested and stuff like that. So I had barometers. If I was him, I'd do something about it, that type of stuff. Until you come here and you find out it's the depth of the pain that motivates us or breaks us to the point where we become teachable, pliable, or whatever it is to understand that you don't know what you're doing.
So speaking of the teachable and pliable, how would you say your sense of purpose changed since sobriety?
Well, in the beginning, I was a receiver. My sense of purpose in the beginning was I wasn't too sure where I was going, but I was sure as hell that I didn't want to go back to where I was. And one of my very first spiritual experiences was I was going through a DUI, and they showed us a film. This is my epiphany. They showed a film, a little short 5-minute film in the DUI school. It was a story of a young couple on a Saturday morning with 2 small children. The husband's in the yard mowing the lawn. The wife's doing the laundry and cleaning the house. And they stop around noontime to have lunch, and they have a couple of drinks, and one thing leads to another, and the husband gets so mad he goes out the front door, slams the door, gets in his car, puts that car in reverse, backs out of his driveway, and runs over and kills his 4-year-old son. And me, that was the ghost of Christmas future, because at the end of my drinking, I was a serious blackout drinker, and I knew I was the kind of guy that even my drunk friends would try to take my keys from me, but I would go out the bathroom window, the back door. I wouldn't tell them I was leaving because my car was a sign of independence and that kind of stuff. But I knew that was my future, because the DUI that I got arrested for, I was drinking at a bar right by North Broward Hospital, Sample on 3rd Ave. Got there at happy hour, drinking 12-ounce draft beers like they were shots. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, coming out of a blackout on 95, driving 80 miles an hour in Hollywood. I have no recollection of anything. And that's when I got arrested, and that began that journey there. So it's a crazy thing to see that with clarity when nothing else was clear. That was the day that I made the decision to not drink. I don't know about not drink forever, but I'm not drinking today. And it's really crazy. And what happened to me is we always see that picture of the guy sitting on the bed with 2 guys carrying the message of sobriety. And that's exactly what happened to me, because 2 days after I made that decision, a fellow came to work where I work. I was a pipe fitter's helper, and he was the pipe fitter, and we worked side by side. And he was sober 11 years at the time. 2 days after I made that decision, and he carried the message.
Wow. Now we'll talk about time and longevity. Is staying sober today harder, easier, or just different than it was in the first year?
I think of that line in Spider-Man to given great power is great responsibility. I can do things today that I could never have done in my early sobriety, and God prepared me for all of that. 2024 was an unbelievable year. My 40th year of sobriety was probably the most challenging in all of my sobriety. But all along the way, like I was in the beginning of the year, I was in I had I had diabetes and I had an episode with DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis, which I collapsed while I was playing hockey and put me in the hospital. And I was so unruly that they had to intubate me. It was basically put me into a coma for 3.5 days. And that little episode really put into perspective new meaning to what they mean by constant vigilance, because I let my guard down on my diet, and one of my medicines took the pharmacy 6 weeks to tell me that I couldn't get it for a year.
Wow.
Which what led up to all of that. So, and then fast forward to that happened in January. Fast forward to October. Well, what led up to it was I started having a little bit of chest discomfort. I had 5 stents put in along the way to lead up to this. But I'm playing hockey, and about 45 minutes into an hour skate, I had some discomfort. And I'm so in tune to my body now that I stopped and I made an appointment. And they tried to do a cardiac cath, maybe put in some more stents, but when they went in, they saw 3 of my existing stents were blocked, and I ended up having to have triple bypass surgery. So now it was really funny because it happened on a Wednesday, and they said, "Hey, we have an open next Wednesday where we can do the surgery." I said, "Okay." So the next day, I'm thinking to myself, "Holy crap! I got a bunch of shit. I got to get my affairs in order." So we postponed it for another 2 weeks, and but that whole period, the focus was on me. Look at David. What's going to happen to David? What are we going to do? My wife wanted to know where the life insurance policy was and things like that. It sounds funny, but that's important crap, right? And but just when you think you have a handle on what's happening, my 23-year-old son, they found a ping pong size growth on inside of one of his lungs, and he needed to have lung surgery at the exact same time that I'm having the heart surgery. And a really weird thing happened is now the focus is not on me, the focus is on him. And I work at the hospital where he had the surgery, so I could be with him 24 hours a day. I was in his room every minute I could be there. And I don't know how many people are familiar with any kind of chest surgery. They put in tubes, and heart surgery, they put 4 tubes to drain your chest cavity so it doesn't build up with fluid. And lung surgery, they went in through the side on my son, and he had 2 tubes, and it's so uncomfortable. You can't sleep, you can't roll over, you can't do anything. And until those tubes come out, you're really not beginning to recover because, and then they're in there every 15 minutes, taking your pulse, taking your blood, all that kind of crap. But I was in the room when they took the tubes out of my son, and I'm holding his hand. And it's probably the most emotional I've been in a long time. And every time I share this part of my story, it brings me to the brink of tears, because I'm holding his hand while they're pulling the tubes out. And it felt like he was going to pull my hand off the end of my arm. And this is the thought that occurred to me there when you talk about the difference as we progress in sobriety. The thought occurred to me crystal clear. God made it clear to me that every single thing that had happened to me up to that point prepared me for that moment in time.
Wow.
And if you had told me any of this crap was going to happen, I don't know what I would have done, But because I did what my sponsor said, do what you can, don't worry about what you can't. So if you're doing the push-ups and jumping jacks along the way and that type of stuff, so the first episode I learned about constant vigilance. The second time, with my son, my surgery wasn't that important at that point, right? But the realization that I was there for him and God prepared me to do that. And then when you think it can't get crazier, about 2 weeks before the end of the year, we get a letter from my landlord's lawyer saying that we're being evicted from a house that we had been in for 4 years. And you don't stay in a house for 4 years because you're a bad tenant.
Mhm.
And but they evicted us on a technicality because the landlord was trying to sell one of her properties, and they got a contract on this house. And even after telling us that if they sell the house, the lease gets attached to it, but when they went to sell the house and pulled out the lease, she never signed it, so the lease was null and void. And if you're it automatically converts to month to month, and you only have to they only have to give you 14-day notice. So
Talk about a year.
right. So, but what I learned from that was that exactly what my sponsor said from the beginning about don't worry about the things you can't do, to worry about the things you can do. The first thing I did when I got the letter is I called the lawyer, and then I went out and looked at 4 houses. So there's a practicality to what we do, but when we talk about the promises and how we intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us, you can't get any more crystal clear than that. So in spite of it being overwhelming, my prayer life has morphed from. I'm not one of these people. I don't pray for anybody. People say that all the time. And the reason I don't pray for anybody is because I feel like I'm going to leave somebody out. I could spend a week in a row praying for people, and I still feel like I'm leaving somebody out. So my prayers and the simplicity of my program is today I ask God, please help me make things better today, and if I can't make them better, stop me from making them worse, because I'm an expert at that.
Mhm.
So if you come from that perspective, you're going to be okay. Because I was a guy that carried a gas can and matches with me, just put gas on the fire all the time and made things worse. And that whole year really exemplified that. And it didn't give me like a big head, like, oh, I got it made. I know what to do about all this stuff, because I didn't until I was in it. And then God made it crystal clear that that's what I was called to do. And so it's an amazing adventure. So today, my purpose really is, and I share this all the time, though, how if I was having serious trouble in my sobriety, I wouldn't bring it to a meeting, because I've developed a network of people who are intimate to me, that know me, that hold me accountable, that I can be vulnerable with. And so my purpose today is, as far as recovery is concerned, is to the new person or the suffering person, because they don't know where to go. And I think about what my sponsor did for me, and we talk about people taking people through the steps and all that stuff. And I'm a big believer in all that. But what he really did for me was he made it okay for me to come back tomorrow, no matter what was going on, whether I was victorious or I was a loser or I was confused, pissed off, angry, whatever it was. And how that manifested itself was sitting in Denny's at 2 o'clock in the morning, being debriefed about what happened during the meeting. He would tell me, that guy's a jerk, don't listen to him, and don't worry about that. If you didn't get anything out of the meeting and you didn't bring anything to put it in, and things like that. In the simplicity of a 5-word sentence, he would knock whatever nonsense was going on in my head and made it okay for me to come back. But the part of that what we don't realize is, in the early days, they would say that if you are not willing to put the time in to help somebody, then you probably shouldn't help them. And the people I met put the time in. And that's what it takes, because when you think about it, one of my friends that I work with said to me one day, "You're not giving me enough guidance." And I thought to myself, "Holy crap! I didn't know I was supposed to do that." And this is what I told him, and this is really the essence of what we do: is that I can't go through it for you, but I sure as shit can go through it with you. And somehow, side by side, we make it to the other side. And I'm a huge believer, thank God we're not all sick on the same day, that some of us are healthy enough to prop each other up in the hopes that you'll do that for me tomorrow. At the end of the day, it's one drunk talking to another. It helps if you talk about recovery. But you have to be taught that, all this stuff is so foreign to us, and how we lived and how we acted and interacted and how we hurt people, and throw a rock in the pond and the pebbles go everywhere. But the good news in sobriety, the same thing happens, but the good riddles. Just like active alcoholism, misery loves company. Well, active sobriety, sobriety loves company too.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing fluid liquid thing that the same things I did in the beginning is the same things I do today, but with more. I'm capable of more. I'm asked to do more, and I'm not one of those people that chase people down or anything like that. What I do is I take care of myself so I can take care of my family, and which allows me to be available when God calls on me to either be counseled or counsel somebody else. And that's a big relief because that takes all the responsibility of, because sobriety begins at home. You got to take, we neglect our family and our friends and our jobs and all that stuff for so long. To be able to reverse that and take care of our basic needs, which allows us to be of service to other people. It's a crazy thing that if you don't fight that, quit the debate in society and all that stuff there, it's unending. Every single day, almost every minute of every day, something comes up if our eyes are open. And then you hear people share all the time, it's based on my spiritual fitness, but that's not what it says. What it says, the maintenance of my spiritual condition, and maintenance requires action. It's constant. You got to polish it and shine it and clean it and protect it. Have alarms and dogs and guardrails and all that shit there. And it doesn't matter whether you have 40 days or 40 years.
So speaking of that, next, do you feel society expects your story to be resolved after being sober for a while?
I don't understand the question. Resolved how?
That the problem has been cured. That there's no more problem.
We were talking about that this morning. It's a lot of stuff. Again, back to the subconscious is so powerful. Some stuff I witness it. It's happened to me. Will come up out of the blue because it's. I don't think they're removed. I think it's more like they're quarantined. And they're under arrest, but they still need observation. They need protection. They need, if they try to escape, that we have the tools to knock them down. So none of that shit goes away. It's the difference between, because I'm not a believer. We always talk about we're selfish, self-centered pricks, but I think it's more about self-preservation. When we were drinking, we would do whatever it took to preserve our ability to drink, because that's what they thought, what we thought was keeping us together. So the same thing happens in sobriety. I got to do whatever it takes to preserve and protect my sobriety. So I don't think it's gone, and I think it's we're just touching the tip of the iceberg because most people don't get it. The estimate is that there's about 30 million people afflicted and only 3 million sober. So that means only 1 in 10 get it. So there's a lot of work to do. And as far as attacking it from a society point of view or our society's point of view, we're just touching the tips of the iceberg. And then what helps me is I play ice hockey, and after the games we barbecue. And one of my friends said to me, and these guys, they're not alcoholics. So maybe out of 40 guys, there might be 2 of us sober. And these guys have a beer and go home. They have 1 or 2 beers and go home and have a hot dog and all that stuff. When I was drinking, we had 10 cases of beer in the trunk after we finished a keg. You know what I'm saying? That's not normal drinking. But I subscribe to the disease concept that I have an allergy, that when I pick up a drink, it puts the craving for another drink and you can't stop. But to try to explain that to a non-alcoholic, alleged normal people who are not afflicted, is a losing battle. So what I say to people is, where the rubber meets the road, because I'm very much a Methodist and I'm very practical about stuff I can pull out and use without thinking about it. I say, do you have kids? And every one of them said, yeah, I got a couple of kids. And I say, then you ought to be glad that an asshole like me is off the road. They understand that because the visual of the consequences of active drinking with a drunk driver, and it's never the drunk dies because we're so loose we can. And then, but it's always some innocent people that were just at the wrong place at the wrong time, and an asshole like me would wipe them off the face of the earth without ever remembering it, you know. So all of that plays into it. That we've made a little dent, but it's just a dent.
Mhm. How do you handle the fear of relapse, if at all?
Never enters my mind.
And now we'll talk about tension and truth. What's something about sobriety that nobody warned you about?
Well, all of that stuff happened in my early sobriety in my first year. Probably for the first um, better part of 5 years, 4.5 years, the idea that there were other people like me, I was not prepared for that.
Mm-hmm.
That when you walk into a room or any given place, any given time, to be able to, when I read the literature in the beginning, that it blew me away how much they knew about me, yet I felt so old and isolated. And then even in sobriety, I went to my sponsor one time and said, I feel like I'm lost and all alone. He said, that's because you're lost and all alone, stupid. So the point is, how we feel doesn't matter. That, if you don't pick up a drink and come back tomorrow, back to not making it worse, which is, can do that kind of stuff.
And you can figure it out tomorrow.
Right.
Just don't pick up that drink.
Right. No, and I'll share that with people who are struggling. They say, I'll drink with you tomorrow, but we're not drinking today. It comes across as a joke, and we giggle about that stuff, but that's really what it happens. We kick the can down the road, and somehow it's until you can figure it out for yourself. But not everybody figures it out. I'm one of these people. I got sober from my first meeting and never looked back, but that doesn't happen for most people. And that's a difficult thing. I heard people share all the time in my early sobriety about they would say, if I pick up a drink, I'm gonna die. And then this is what happened to me, and I think it happens to most people. I finally told my sponsor my real story, not my bullshit story about being hungover on a Saturday morning. I had some serious legal charges and stuff like that, and I said to him, I'm never going to be able to take care of this crap, the wreckage of the past, as we talk about. And he said, well, you know how you take care of the wreckage of the past? You stop creating wreckage. And I said, what? He says, then you can chip away. Some stuff you have to take care of right away, but some stuff you're going to have to do push-ups and jumping jacks. And when it comes up, you'll be able to handle it. But for a lot of people, they reach that point and they say it's not worth it. And they pick up a drink and they don't die. And they say, you people are full of shit. I drank and didn't die. But the death we're talking about is a spiritual death where we don't care. And that's a horrible place to be, and it's a horrible place to come back from. So it's really funny. I witness over the time I've been sober, when people come back, either with time or no time, what they're really saying when they come back is, I finally joined the club. Because there's a big difference between being in sobriety and being around sobriety. But you don't know that till you experience it. And it's amazing that the door is still open for them to come back. That's the mind-blowing thing. And at that juncture, people don't. I share this all the time now. You don't need to tell people that they feel like shit. They already know that they feel like shit. What they need is a hug and tell them it's going to be okay and come back tomorrow and I'll be there for you. And that's the difference. Because that's a tough place to be. That I haven't experienced, but I witness it all the time. So I'm very cognizant of that, especially around new people or suffering people. Back to the idea that my job is to make it as easy as for you to stay in that seat that you're in, because people didn't treat me like that before, like the judge and stuff like that. It's crazy when you are able to step outside yourself and see what we're doing here. And what we're doing is important work because we're saving lives, starting out with our own. And when people come to us, they don't have a clue. All they can see is this room. All my problems are in this room. We can't see what's up there or what's there, or how we fit back into the real world and stuff. We're so concerned about I'm never going to be able to take care of any of this shit. And we're here to say it's going to be okay. I'm going to fix it today. We'll fix it together tomorrow.
Have you ever felt trapped by your sobriety? Like it's a part of your identity that you're not allowed to outgrow or question?
I, for me personally, I see that happen to a lot of people where their identity becomes their program. And, I remember my sponsor telling the guy who at the time, he was 15 and a half years sober. He was really active, but he was a little bit off kilter. And my sponsor said to him, he says, you know what? There's a program of recovery around here, and maybe you should think about joining it. And I was flabbergasted because the guy was 15 and a half years sober. And at the time, I thought that was important, but it's really about the quality. And then I've come to realize that the compassion that we have is today, just like active alcoholism has yets, sobriety has yets too. They haven't got it yet. And if you don't, this is the sad story for me. I was 4.5 years sober. My sponsor was 15 and a half years sober, and he committed suicide sober. And it really blew my mind um, back to the idea of front burner issues and back burner issues. Well, he had some back burner issues that he had never dealt with, and when it came up, he couldn't handle it. He wasn't prepared for it. My first thought was, "Where are you going? I'm not done with you. How am I going to make it without you?" And then the next thought was, the reason I was still sober was because of the things that he's taught me, and he's really not gone because I can't open my mouth without him coming out. That's kind of part of the spiritual part of the people who came before us. And I also reached a new conclusion because I never, my first 4.5 years, would ever, ever, ever tell anybody to pick up a drink. But I wish he drank. So if it's a choice between suicide and drinking, I say drink because you might have a chance then. And, which changed my compassion for people to understand that they may be messed up right now. They may not be doing the way I think they should, or experience tells us that they should do. And you'll have conversations with people, and they know exactly what to do. And if they're not doing it, they're going to suffer. That's the people telling you the truth. Yeah. But we let them suffer in hopes that they'll make it through that threshold or through that archway to where it becomes. Our friend Pam says it all the time that it's amazing when it reaches a point where it becomes effortless. And in my case, my sponsor said that if you're willing to go to any length, you won't have to. Mm-hmm. So I don't really go around breaking my anonymity or dragging people off of bar stools or any of that stuff. I'm available. And that's a big, big deal because the people who do that, it's so obvious that they're leading with the ego, like they think there's something. So that's the biggest thing I'm on guard about is my ego. I was at a meeting not too long ago where the guy was a guru. And I don't think people become gurus on purpose. I think someone says, hey, Carlo, you have a good knowledge of the steps. Why don't you come to our group and do a series, do the 12 steps over 12 weeks? The guy goes, and before you know it, he's got groupies and stuff. He didn't ask for that. And then it goes to your head, and you think you're wonderful and all that stuff. I was at a meeting where there was one of those guys like that, puppet master, on the sidelines, telling people what to do and all this kind of stuff. And the thought occurred to me. Now I'm very much a judgmental prick that I've been able to keep it in check. I always share sometimes that if you knew what I was really thinking, you wouldn't like me very much. But I really have caught on to the greater good and how would it make it better. So I thought to myself, I'm going to go up to this guy after the meeting, and this one I'm going to say, I'm going to shake his hand. I'm going to say, man, what a great meeting. He said, it's unbelievable, though, that I finally met my match, someone with a bigger ego than me. But I didn't do it, so there's some growth there for me. Who cares what the other people are doing? The only person that needs to do the things that we're taught to do is me. Mm-hmm.
So speaking of me, we'll talk about relationships and realities now. How did your relationships change? Not right after sobriety, but over time.
Oh well, over time, my wife and I got sober. I got sober in January '85. She got sober in May of '85, and during the big recession, turned down real estate crash of 2008, 2009. Things got bad. My wife ended up picking up a drink at 27 and a half years sober. And we talk about relationships. It's this really crazy thing because part of me said, and people say don't tell her story. Well, her story is part of my story. You don't stay together for 27 years because you're separate people. It's an integral part of my story, just from my perspective, and she has her perspective. But mine, um, over the course of, took her 7 years to get back, and the good news is in August she'll have 7 years back.
Awesome.
So it was no sort of real alcoholic, a real drug addict. So it wasn't no slippery slope, but she went off a cliff, right off a cliff. And in the course of 5 years, it was treatment, Baker acted, jail, treatment.
The cycle.
It was horrible. And 99 out of 100 guys would have been gone. I had so many people tell me, "What's wrong with you? Why are you staying with her?" and all that stuff. And obviously, I wasn't quite as mentally stable as I am now when I was going through that. And the question I had trouble with, relationship-wise, was what am I more afraid of, losing her or starting over? Because think about starting over after 27 years. I was on the loop for a little while. I wouldn't know what to do. It would be back to that scared kid being afraid to ask a girl out, kind of thing. But the overwhelming thing that happened to me is that the conviction I had and the understanding of marriage. If you want to be married, it's a good idea to believe in marriage. And so the overwhelming thing that got me through that period is that when I said for better or worse, did I mean it or not? And at that juncture, I began to treat her like she was lost, like the story of the prodigal son, and hopefully she'll make her way back. And in the end, she did. So relationships, I'll tell you, it's really funny because we've lived through some of the most contentious political times of the world. But relationship, I don't care what relationship it is, whether it's political, work, friends, husband, wife, father, son, all that stuff there is all about compromise. Let's take a political election. So there's the election part where I throw darts at you and say, he's not the right guy for the job, and I pump myself up and say, this is the reason I'm the right guy for the job. But one day comes election day, and there's an election, somebody wins and somebody loses, and now it's about governing. And governing is about compromise because nobody's getting everything they want. And I translate that in every relationship. If you can't have a dialogue, that's how civil war starts, right? I mean, so just because it's okay to disagree, you got to pick your fights. You got to learn how to make an argument rather than argue, and that all is about compromise with the understanding nobody's getting everything they want. So for relationships, that's what permeates my observation of my own and the metamorphosis of getting to the point where I'm at today. So we're married. May 8th, we just celebrated 37 years. So it's got a little experience. I tease people I'm on my second 20-year consecutive sentence. That's the other one. Is without a sense of humor, we're jumping off a bridge every Friday. So got to be able to laugh at yourself. And the other part of the relationship part is I tell my wife all the time that I'm not the entertainment committee. I'm your hubby. I'm not your hobby. And if you think we're together because you make me happy, we're out of our minds. The happiness and serenity comes from within, and I want to share that with you. And if we're together for any other reason, there's a partnership there. And because a lot of times we think, we got to fix her upper. And that has to be squashed like a bug. Back to encouraging people, propping them up, putting them in a position to be successful. I mean, when you think about, recovery, there's no place on the face of the earth that is rooting for you to succeed like our fellow people who were here before us. And that's an overwhelming thought that everybody's rooting for you because we're deathly afraid that could be us in the blink of an eye. So it's really crazy. So relationships, it's all about relationships. That's what the big book says, our inability to have bonding relationships. And when I think of that, I think of the word intimacy. And when I was new, 27 years old, if you said intimacy to me, you're thinking about sex, but it has nothing to do with sex. It has to do with being vulnerable. It has to do with risk taking. It has to do holding each other accountable. And if you can hold all five fingers with the people that you're intimate with, that if you said something happened to me, they would take care of your family, you're doing good.
Yeah.
So,
Speaking of that, do you feel judged or misunderstood even years after sobriety?
the misunderstanding and misjudgment is mostly in the recovery world, because I'm a big believer in that there's recovery is no different than any place else. There's so much misinformation, and everybody doesn't have your best interest at heart. And to protect that, at some point, you got to be willing to tell people the truth, even if it means. That's back to my picture of this is you see someone walking across a field who's struggling, and I know there's a cliff at the end of the field. Am I not supposed to warn them? Even if they get pissed off and say, leave me alone, I want to go anyhow, and they fall off the cliff, to not say something, and the next day say, man, I wish I did more. That's the kind of controversial I'll get into with people who don't see that we're supposed to protect each other, we're supposed to encourage each other. And when I see that, for lack of a better word, injustice or judgmental or condescending attitude and all that stuff, that's the part that it's hard not to get in conflicts that way. So you pick and choose your battles, and then you got to be able to tell somebody. I heard a guy say this. He was talking about you got to be a statesman. You got to be able to tell someone to go to hell, and have them say, "Man, that's a good idea. I think I'll go."
Hmm.
You know. So you can talk to people. You can have a conversation with people without alienating them. You know, as long as my heart's in the right spot and I'm not making it worse, which is the easiest way to help somebody. You know, the idea about attraction, not promotion, is huge. To when there was a young guy that was coming around, he was sober about 90 days. He was in halfway, and he got kicked out of the halfway house, and I befriended him. And relationship starts with a mustard seed of chemistry. You know, there's an attraction. When it comes to like a sponsor-sponsee relationship, there's got to be a mustard seed of chemistry. Otherwise, you're not going to talk to one another. And then it can grow from there because you feel comfortable. Whether you're both plumbers or you both came from Boston or whatever it is that ignites that makes you feel comfortable enough to talk to somebody. So anyhow, this kid, young black kid, not that that matters, but different worlds, different experiences. He struggled and he came around and he finally got kicked out of halfway and he's walking down Federal Highway with his backpack and I'm at a meeting, an 8 o'clock meeting, and I get a text from him. And it says, David, I just got kicked out of halfway and I need help bad. And a thought occurred to me. Out of 8 billion people on the earth, this kid reached out to me. And when you put that into perspective, that's an overwhelming, humbling to realize that I made him comfortable enough in his darkest moment to reach out to me. Then I'm thinking, holy crap, can I do this? And then at the end of the day, all he needed was a hug to make him feel comfortable to come back. And he ended up moving back to Virginia with his mom and stuff. I'm not sure how he's turned out or anything, but that experience puts it into perspective about why I'm here. And then you'll have experiences along the way where stuff happens that just blows you out of the water, knocks you off knocks your serenity out of whack. And that happened to me twice at the place where we go to meetings, where this guy was out of his mind, and I thought and I shared about it over the course of a couple of days. Now, bear in mind, I'm 37 years sober at the time, and I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe maybe I'll be the better man and go some other place. And he's comfortable here. He's been coming here longer than me, and then that was my thinking. I shared that in a general way, not the particulars about it. And then there was a girl about 2 weeks later who heard that I might not be coming to the meetings anymore at this particular place. And she said, of the spiritual experience, and she said, when I come to the 8 o'clock meeting and David's not here, I am sad.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, holy crap, I'm going to let one asshole ruin my serenity when I have literally dozens, if not hundreds of people who care about me. And it put me right back in where I'm at. The reality that I'm, somebody thinks I'm effective enough, somebody that thinks that I contribute, and when you feel like, holy crap, I don't want to go through this, have to put up with this asshole. And it's just one person.
Yeah.
But 37 years sober, and that's where you go.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
someone comes along and says, holy crap, that's a humbling experience, man.
Mhm.
And I've had that happen to me. I've had that happen to me just recently. It's crazy. But the cool thing is that in the middle of that, over the course of a couple of days, it dawned on me. Her name was Sherry, the girl that she did. And Sherry came right to my mind, and the same thing applied there. So there was a precedent because I didn't screw it up there. I didn't engage. And you think about what my sponsor said in the beginning, who's the nut? Them for having a merry-go-round? Are you getting on it with them? And today I choose to not get on the merry-go-round. There's some solace in that, to not get caught up in that crap. And when it happens, because part of me doesn't plan that way, because I got a million other things going on. And then that just, because of the footwork that we do, that you develop the muscles and stuff to do that. And when it happens, it's powerful shit, man. It's not only powerful stuff for me, but people see that and say, holy crap, I would have went and kicked that guy's ass. Never mind stop going to the meetings. Then where would we be?
So after 40 years of sobriety now, have you ever assumed that you're cured?
No. What I assume is that what I've been doing up to now works. Probably after 5 years, you start to realize that every single thing you taught me and that I've experienced has been specifically designed for my benefit. And when I came to sobriety and recovery, I thought there was a group of people in another room plotting my demise. That I never got an even break, and I carried a flag at the front of the victims' parade. And then when I got there, I saw you at that parade. I saw a lot of other people that were at that same parade. And you get to realize that I've benefited so much, and as a result of that, other people have benefited too. I'm a big believer in this too. As I've gotten better, everybody around me has gotten better.
Absolutely.
I was sharing this the other day at a meeting how you don't stay married for 37 years without some ups and downs. And I was teasing someone. I said one day I said to my wife, I said, "Man, I never noticed those fangs, tail, and horns. What the hell did they come from?" It's amazing how much, if we're coming from a love, compassion, and understanding, we don't see any of that. They're there all the time, and I have my own. But if it's no longer about me, instead it becomes me, I'm responsible. I tease people today. I say I'm going home to a wife of 37 years and a 24-year-old son that both know how to operate vacuum cleaners and stereo, who is sucking the life right out of me. But it's a thing that I take very seriously because that's my responsibility. That's what I've been called to do, and now I'm equipped to actually do it. That's back to the with great power comes great responsibility. It sounds like a corny thing, but it's really true. That you're the one for the job. That's what you went here and something happened here, and I'm telling you, this is what you're supposed to do, pal. I prepared you for that. And that happens all the time, especially last year with all the things that happened to me along the way. I mean, it's crazy.
Do you believe everyone needs total abstinence to recover?
Yes.
Or is that just your path?
No, yes. Well, what works for me is in our 12 step where it talks about practice these principles in all our affairs. So I could go to, I'm eligible for probably half a dozen other programs of recovery, but there's not enough time in the day. And if I practice these principles in all my affairs, I don't have too much trouble with that. Uh, I think about, back to people who say that it's okay to do barbiturates, but they don't drink. I couldn't do it. There's no way. There's, the one of the reasons we can recover when I was talking about earlier about when we're drinking, we're so remorseful because we know if we weren't drinking, we wouldn't have done that, and that's a heartbreaking place to be internally. So that whole process is an ongoing liquid thing that has back to the idea about it's the maintenance of my spirit condition, which means action.
Is there something about the recovery community that they get wrong or needs to change, in your opinion?
Um, Obviously it's my opinion, and right now I am doing a big historical study. Well, how did they do it in the beginning? Because you'll hear people say all the time, "Oh, the programs got watered down, and there used to be a 75% success rate." And there's a few books on that, and I'm studying that now. And how did these people get sober before our literature was ever written and stuff? Because it was about a 5 year span there. How did they do it?
Hmm.
And and then they talk about the purist. They'll say that it doesn't say that in the first 164 pages, and all sorts of crap like that. So there's the problem is you have to be taught this. No, here like you know, people tell you go make coffee, be a greeter, uh, all that kind of stuff there. But when I got sober, nobody ever told me to do that. They were doing it, and they allowed me to do it with them. So I was taught how to do it. And some of the best examples in early sobriety, the examples I saw around me was how my sponsor treated the waitress at Denny's, or when we were driving in traffic, or how he treated people on the job, because we worked together side by side for 2 years, 8 hours a day. Not many people get that attention that I got. And when you see that, it's a different animal. They say, "Holy crap! I hope I can do that someday." Well, if that guy did that to me, I'd go kick his ass. That kind of stuff there, because that's where reactionary people, and when you don't react, you say, "Who was that guy?"
And that goes back to what you were saying, back to these principles in all of our
Right.
affairs and how you are in all situations.
Well, I'll give you an example of that. There's a club in Pompano where the people say this is not a recovery club. It's a club that we rent out space for the groups to have their meetings at. And then another guy piped up, and he said, "But you know what? The people who are running this club are supposed to be practicing these principles in all their affairs. That means here too. You don't turn it off and turn it on when you disagree or get frustrated or whatever, or think you have a better idea and all that crap, which is not conducive for making us attractive to the people that need the help."
So here's maybe a controversial one, but do you think addiction gave you anything of value, or would you erase it if you could?
I used to regret a lot of stuff. Um, for instance, when I was a young boy, I think I had normal aspirations. I wanted to be a professional hockey player, a professional baseball player, or a forest ranger, or what I would say were normal aspirations for a young kid, 8, 9, 10 years old, right? And then when I was old enough I started selling drugs. My story is I sold drugs from the time I was 16 to the time I was 25. Yeah. So who needs college when you're 16 years old making $50,000 a year in 1970, right? I made more money than my dad and all that stuff there. But I had some seriously good opportunities. I was the kind of kid in school. I did what I knew, and the rest was blank, and that was good enough for A's and B's. I graduated 75th in a class of 625. So school school came so easy to me, I never took a book home from the ninth grade on. I did the homework in the next class. The class it was good enough for A's and B's. So I had some ridiculous opportunities. I applied to Boston University and University of New Hampshire, and I could have gone there on hockey scholarships. My mom knew a congressman, and every congressman gets to appoint 2 kids from his district to one of these, like West Point or Annapolis or the Air Force Academy. And all they had to do was say, yes, I want to go, and I could have gone. And my sister knew the dean of admissions at Harvard, and Harvard's the kind of school where if you can get in and survive the first year, they're going to do whatever they can to help you because they don't want one person to fail and give them a bad, black eye. And I said, oh, the other ones, I could have, the same congressman, I could have gone to Washington, D.C. and been a page in Congress and go to high school in Washington, D.C. and been involved in all of that there. And I said, no, I'd rather stand on a street corner and sell drugs. And so when I came and got sober, I was telling my sponsor some of that stuff, and he said, you know what? That might not have changed anything because we got drunk conquerors and we got drunk hockey players and we got drunk forest rangers and we got drunk. So there's no guarantee that if I chose that path, I wouldn't have turned out the same way. So there's an acceptance there that, and then I share all the time, and you've probably heard me say it, that at a certain point, you cannot defuse a bomb that's already exploded. And, then you start to realize, well, I never would have met my wife. I never would have had my son. All the things I wouldn't have met you, all that stuff there. So whatever I traded off or thought I lost or that I regret, I've gotten back tenfold. Because, AA has taught me that I can do anything and I can probably do it better than most people. All I got to do is put the effort in.
Amazing, amazing. Well, David, thank you so much for your insight. I think it's been very valuable to hear your experience, strength, and hope. And if you have any message out there to anybody watching who's maybe in the thick of it and doesn't know what to do or doesn't know what to start or has no idea if you have any advice.
Well, until you're ready, nothing's going to happen. And until you learn to put the plug in the jug and give yourself a chance. What I didn't realize when I came to my first meeting in the recovery, that I had won the lotto. I didn't believe it, I didn't feel it, but the people I met believed it, and they felt it, and made it so easy for me to come back. But I understand there's so much misinformation that it's easy to get disillusioned and get hooked up with people that don't know what the hell they're talking about. And the program of recovery that we've chose is not the only way to get sober, but it's my experience that it works best for most people. And I'm not here, and I know Carlos thinks the same way, that I'm not here to endorse anything that is lightly veiled in our sharing. But we do that to protect it because we don't want to put ourselves in a position to give recovery a black eye, to scare someone away. But if you're ready to give it a chance, we're waiting. There's a seat with your name on it, and if you happen to come to the same place I'm at, you're going to get a big hug. Awesome. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you again, David, for your time. 40 years of sobriety. Thank you all for listening out there. If you have any stories of your own, feel free to comment them down below. And if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. And thank you again.
You're very welcome. Thanks for asking me.
Absolutely.
I think we did good.
Yeah.